Darkness has a way of leaving fingerprints upon the ages, even when the hand that shaped it is long gone. Among the shadows of Middle-earth, none clung as tightly nor as terribly as the One Ring, a harbinger of power and tragedy that shaped the fate of many. From its creation to the rise and devastating wars, these tales reveal the true cost of ambition and desire. Before we continue, if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, it would mean the world and help us share more tales of Arda. Now, let's return to the story. It was not gold, though it shone like it, nor was it mere ornament, though its surface was smooth, flawless, and unbroken. To those who glimpsed it, the ring was perfection made metal, a thing so simple in shape, so innocent in size, that one might almost laugh at the thought of it being dangerous. It was small, golden, and deceptively plain, and yet it changed the fate of Middle-earth forever. This is the story of the One Ring, forged in fire, drowned in shadow, carried by kings, stolen by thieves, and destroyed by the smallest of hands. The ring was never just an artifact. It was Sauron's will made visible, a shard of his soul bound to metal. Across 3 ages, it shaped the destiny of elves, men, dwarves, and hobbits. To trace its story is to trace the history of Middle-earth itself. Every tale it touched became twisted, bent toward ruin. Heroes who sought to master it fell into despair. Kings who dreamed of wielding it found only chains upon their own souls. Even those who merely carried it were consumed, as though the ring were a slow poison dripping drop by drop into their hearts. Its power was not only to enslave others, but to hollow the one who bore it, until desire itself became the prison. Yet the ring was also patient. Where its master's hand faltered, it endured. Where kingdoms rose and fell, it waited. And though Sauron's form was broken more than once, the ring carried his malice forward, like a shard of his spirit wandering the ages. Each bearer became a stepping stone, each tragedy a thread in its long and merciless design. To understand its story is to walk the dark roads of Middle-earth itself, from the forges of Eregion to the fires of Orodruin, from the glories of kings to the solitude of a hobbit's hand. This is no simple tale of power lost and found. It is the history of corruption, of hope tested, and of the endurance of evil across the ages. And so we begin where all legacies of the ring must begin, in the secret, fire-lit chambers of Eregion, where craft and deception intertwined, and where Sauron first wove his will into gold. In the days when the elves still flourished in their hidden realms, when their craft was unmatched and their wisdom near to the memory of Valinor itself, there arose among them a master smith, Celebrimbor, grandson of Feanor. His hands wrought wonders, and his heart longed not for war or conquest, but for beauty and the preservation of all things fair. To him and his people came a stranger, cloaked in seeming benevolence. He named himself LOTR, the Lord of Gifts, and his words dripped with honeyed counsel. He spoke of secret knowledge, of powers that could mend the hurts of Middle-earth, of craft that could ward against the slow decay of time itself. The elves, weary from centuries of struggle, listened, and in their pride, though born of noble intent, they welcomed him. Only Gil-galad and Elrond mistrusted the stranger and barred him from Lindon, but in Arion his counsel was embraced. There, under his guidance, the smiths of the Gwaithemyrdain set hammer to anvil and brought forth rings of power. Lesser rings at first, trinkets of skill unmatched, but soon greater works, 16 in all, vessels of strength, resilience, and dominion. Yet in the secret chambers of Orodruin, far to the east, Onotar cast aside his fair mask, for he was no lord of gifts, but Sauron, lieutenant of Morgoth, now master of his own dark will. Into the very fires of Mount Doom he poured his malice, his cunning, his unyielding hunger for control. There he wrought the ruling ring, the one to govern all others. In its making, he bent his very essence into gold, binding his life and strength to it so that as long as it endured, so too would his will. Upon its surface, he inscribed words that only flame could reveal. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. When at last Sauron slipped the ring upon his finger, the elves felt it instantly. Their hearts recoiled, their hands froze upon the works they had crafted. In terror they perceived his intent. Their rings, once thought to be their salvation, had become snares, subject to the will of the Dark Lord. Yet Celebrimbor had wrought 3 rings in secret, untouched by Sauron's hand. The fairest of all, meant not for rule, but for preservation. These he hid, sending one to Gil-galad, one to Galadriel, and one to Círdan, before Sauron's wrath descended upon Arion. War swept the land, fire consumed its forges, and Celebrimbor was taken. Tortured, broken, and slain, he revealed the hiding places of the lesser rings, though never the 3. Thus the 7 were given to the dwarves, the 9 to men. And so began the great tragedy of the ages, as kings and lords accepted the gifts of the enemy, not knowing that a single circle of gold held the leash to all their power. In that hour, the One Ring first showed its nature, not merely an object, but the extension of Sauron himself. Through it, he sought to master not only the elves, but all the people of Middle-earth. It was his voice in metal, his hunger made tangible, a thread tying the fate of the world to his dominion. And though the elves resisted, though the 3 were kept safe, the shadow of the ring had already spread, and a storm was gathering. For soon the free people would unite in desperate defiance, and Sauron himself would stride forth in war, wielding the ring upon his hand. The world trembled under the shadow of Sauron's rising might. Men of Gondor and Arnor, elves of Lindon and Imladris, dwarves of the Blue Mountains, even the scattered remnants of old alliances looked upon the growing darkness and knew that the hour of reckoning had come. In the plains of Dagorlad, where grass had withered beneath the tread of Orcish legions, the armies of the free peoples gathered, their banners fluttering like desperate hope against the black winds of Mordor. Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, stood beside Elendil of Númenor, a man whose eyes bore the sorrow of a people already half lost. Together, they forged the last alliance, a fellowship of elves and men united by dread and duty. And from the misty heights of the Misty Mountains to the green fields of the Anduin, the drums of war thundered, calling all who could wield sword or bow to the battle for the fate of the world. Sauron came with fire and terror, his presence like a shadow swallowing the sun. His armies poured from the Black Land, orcs clad in iron, trolls that cracked stone beneath their feet, and fell beasts that darkened the skies. And there, in the heart of Mordor, he wore the One Ring, a circle of gold that made him more than man, more than lord. It made him a god of war, a terror whose gaze could crush the will of kings. For 7 years the war raged, siege upon siege, storm upon storm, rivers of blood upon the plains of Middle-earth. Gil-galad and Elendil met Sauron himself in single combat atop the slopes of Orodruin. Steel rang against shadow, and the heavens seemed to tremble as the kings of men and elves fought the Dark Lord. At last, the strength of ages could hold no longer, and Sauron fell, His body destroyed, his spirit scattered. But the one ring endured, unbroken, waiting for the next hand to grasp it. It was then that Isildur, son of Elendil, claimed the ring. And in that instant, the hearts of all who knew the danger shivered. For though the ring might have been destroyed, though the Dark Lord had fallen, the ring was not evil in the sense of mindless malice. It was cunning, patient, and it sought its own survival. It is an heirloom, some might have whispered, a token of triumph. But the wise among them, Gandalf and Elrond alike, saw the truth. The ring would corrupt its bearer, bending even the noblest heart toward greed and self-preservation. And yet, Isildur, weary and prideful, did not heed them. The counsel of the ages was spoken in vain. "I will keep it," he said. "It is mine by right, and it shall serve my line." And so he turned from the doom that might have been averted, carrying with him a seed of shadow, a spark that would smolder quietly for centuries. But the world is not without memory, and the ring is not without fate. Isildur fell to ambush in the Anduin, his men struck down by orcs, the ring slipping from his hand into the river, disappearing beneath waters dark and deep. And there it lay, unseen, unheard, a silent witness to the ages to come. Its power undiminished, biding time until a new hand, small and unassuming, would lift it once more. The Anduin flowed on, ancient and unyielding, a silver serpent winding its way through the lands of men. Upon its surface, the blood of Isildur was swallowed and carried away, and with it the hope of ending the shadow once and for all. But beneath its waters, in the cool darkness of its bed, the ring sank. Not broken, not lost in truth, simply waiting. For centuries, the river held its secret. Kingdoms rose and crumbled, towers of men fell into ruin, forests stretched and receded, but the ring endured. It had no need for haste. Its master was diminished, yes, a shadow without form, yet bound still to the ring's fate. As long as it remained, so too did he. And though no hand touched it, its malice did not sleep. It called, faintly, invisibly, like the whisper of a voice at the edge of a dream. Ages passed. The world forgot the golden band that had toppled kings and bent nations. Tales of it became legend, then faded into myth. Yet the ring is not so easily undone. It seeks always to return to the hand of its master. And the hour came when chance, or perhaps something darker than chance, placed it once more in the path of those who could not resist it. It was in the reeds of the Gladden fields that two friends, Smeagol and Deagol, cast their lines into the river. It was Deagol who first saw the gleam, the sun catching upon a curve of gold drawn up from the depths. His breath caught at its beauty, and the world seemed for a moment to narrow into that single shining circle. Smeagol's eyes fell upon it, and in that instant the ring's will began its work. Desire flared within him, fierce and unrelenting, as though the ring itself had chosen him. He demanded it, pleaded for it, until at last he seized it by force, strangling the life from his own kin. Thus, blood marked the ring's re-emergence into the world, and the slow unraveling of Smeagol's soul began. He hid his treasure, clutching it with a hunger that consumed his days and nights. The ring stretched his life far beyond its natural span, yet it was no gift. His body withered, his mind twisted, his name lost to the thing he had become. He was Gollum now, muttering to himself in dark caves, his eyes pale and wide, his voice rasping with longing and fear. The ring sustained him, but it did not love him. For though it clung to him for an age, it was not content. It was patient, yes, but it hungered always for a greater destiny, for the hand of its master. And so, though it preserved Gollum, it also betrayed him. For in the shadows of the misty mountains where he hid from the world, the ring's silence was merely the pause before the next great turning of fate. The world above had moved on. Men warred among themselves, elves retreated into their dwindling realms, and dwarves delved their halls of stone. But in the Shire, far from the thunders of history, a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins was about to stumble upon the golden thread that bound the fate of the world together. When Bilbo at last prepared to leave the Shire, his heart full of wanderlust and his years unnaturally extended, the moment of parting revealed what the ring had long whispered. Gandalf, watching keenly, urged him to leave it behind. But the words caught in Bilbo's throat, his hand tightening around the small circle of gold as though his very breath depended on it. "It is mine," he muttered, his voice sharp, defensive. Yet, with the wizard's steady gaze and the stirrings of his own better nature, Bilbo relented. He let it fall to the floor of Bag End, a sound as soft as a sigh, yet heavy as the turning of an age. Thus the ring passed to Frodo Baggins. Unlike his uncle, Frodo did not stumble upon it by chance, nor claim it in a moment of whim. He received it with foreboding, aware, through Gandalf's grave counsel, that this was no ordinary trinket, but the very weapon of the enemy. In Frodo's small, steady hands lay a peril greater than any sword or crown. But Frodo was not alone. When the shadow lengthened and the ringwraiths rode forth from Mordor, their shrieks piercing the night, Frodo set out from the Shire with Sam, Merry, and Pippin, hobbits as small as he, but bound by loyalty greater than fear. The world they stepped into was vast and perilous, yet their courage was a light against the dark. The journey soon grew heavy. At the Council of Elrond in Rivendell, the fate of the ring was debated. Proud men argued, wise elves counseled, dwarves muttered their grievances, but none could deny the truth. The ring could not be wielded. It could not be hidden. It could only be unmade in the fire where it was forged. And so the Fellowship was born. 9 companions, bound not by blood or race, but by the desperate hope of defeating Sauron. On their road, the ring revealed its true cruelty. Boromir, son of Gondor, noble yet burdened by the weight of his people's doom, fell prey to its lure. In the hush of the wild, he turned to Frodo, his voice trembling with need. "Why do you deny Gondor this weapon? With it we could break the enemy." His hands seized, his eyes fevered, and Frodo fled in terror, the bond of fellowship torn by the ring's venom. Yet not only Boromir felt its pull. Galadriel, wise and radiant, stood before Frodo in the Golden Wood. He offered her the ring, trembling, and in that instant she revealed the storm within. Her voice rang like thunder. "All shall love me and despair." She stood tall, terrible as the morning and the night, a queen with the world at her feet. And then she laughed, soft and sorrowful, and passed the test. She would diminish, she said, and go into the west. The ring's temptation was strong, but the strength to refuse it was greater still. Even Gandalf, long before, had recoiled when Frodo offered it to him. "Do not tempt me," he said, his eyes blazing. "I dare not take it. Through me, it would wield a power too great and terrible to imagine." The wizard's wisdom was not to master the ring, but to recognize that no one, not even the wise, could wield it without ruin. And so Frodo bore the burden, a weight that grew heavier with every step. His friends could guard him, counsel him, bleed for him,
but the ring was his alone to carry. Its whispers gnawed at his mind, its cold touch ate into his heart. Each mile eastward was a battle not only against Mordor's shadows, but against the corruption coiled around his very soul. Yet still he walked, still he endured. A small hobbit, nameless in the eyes of the great, carrying upon his shoulders the fate of all free peoples.
The road eastward ended where it began, in fire. The fellowship was broken, kingdoms had bled, friends had fallen, yet still Frodo and Sam pressed on. Their bodies were wasted by hunger, their feet raw from stone and ash, yet their will endured where armies could not. Beyond the black gates, beyond the endless plains of Mordor, the mountain loomed, the furnace of Sauron's power, the place where the ring had first been forged and where alone it could be unmade. The land itself seemed to conspire against them. Ash fell like snow, choking the air. The eye of Sauron burned from its dark tower, scouring the wastes for the smallest sign of defiance. Yet his gaze, vast though it was, turned outward, blind to the broken hobbits stumbling ever closer to the very heart of his strength. For war raged at his gates. Aragorn, Gandalf, and all the free peoples had gathered in desperate defiance, their banners raised not to win, but to distract, to buy a single chance for two small hobbits to succeed where none else could. At last, Frodo and Sam came to the brink. The fire roared beneath their feet, the mountain shook, and the ring, sensing its doom, grew heavy as lead. Frodo staggered, trembling, his hand tightening around the chain at his neck. Sam, faithful beyond all hope, urged him on. "Throw it in! Let it go!" But the ring had worked its poison too deeply. Frodo's voice, once gentle and uncertain, now rang with a cold, unyielding finality. "I will not do this deed. The ring is mine." And with that, he slipped it upon his finger and vanished. For a heartbeat, the world seemed lost. The quest, the sacrifice, the blood spilled, all undone in a single breath. On his dark throne, Sauron felt it, the sudden presence of his ring, the return of his soul. The eye wheeled, the ground shuddered, and doom surged like a tide. Yet fate had not finished its weave. Gollum, wretched and pitiful, had stalked them to the end, driven by nothing but his hunger for the ring. In madness and ecstasy, he sprang upon Frodo, teeth sinking into his hand. A cry of pain split the air as the ring-bearer was thrown aside, bleeding, broken. And there, at the very edge of the fire, Gollum danced with his prize, clutched to his chest, his eyes wild with triumph. Precious, precious, his hours! But triumph turned to ruin. His foot slipped, the rock crumbled, and, in a final gasp of joy and terror, Gollum fell. Down he plunged, the ring clasped in his hands, into the fire of Orodruin. Flame roared upward, the gold melted, and the will of Sauron was undone in an instant. His tower shuddered, cracked, and fell. His armies broke and fled, and the eye was extinguished in a scream that echoed across the land. Upon the slopes of the mountain, Frodo and Sam lay in the dust, the burden lifted at last. They had not destroyed the ring by will alone. Indeed, Frodo had failed at the final hour. But mercy, pity, and the strange designs of fate had accomplished what strength could not. It was not the hand of a king or a warrior that ended the age of Sauron, but the long thread of compassion that had spared Gollum's life. So ended the power of the One Ring, not with the triumph of the mighty, but with the fall of the wretched into the fire from which it came. When the fire swallowed the ring, the very bones of Mordor groaned. Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, crumbled stone by stone, its foundations unraveling with the spirit bound to them. The sky, once black with shadow, cracked with light. Orcs scattered like insects deprived of their hive, their cries swallowed by the thunder of ruin. And upon the slopes of Orodruin, 2 hobbits lay exhausted, awaiting death with hands clasped and hearts at peace. But death did not take them. Great eagles, borne by the winds of the west, swept down through the ash and fire, lifting Frodo and Sam from the jaws of the mountain. They awoke in the houses of healing, their burdens cast off, their names sung in the halls of kings. The quest of Mount Doom was fulfilled. In Minas Tirith, the White City, Aragorn was crowned king, the last heir of Elendil raised to his throne. Beside him stood Arwen Undomiel, her beauty a light against the fading world, and Gandalf the Grey, now robed in white, a guide until his task was ended. The Fourth Age dawned, the Age of Men, when the dominion of elves would pass and the memory of magic would slowly wane. Yet victory bore sorrow, for with the ring's destruction came the fading of all rings. The 3, though never touched by Sauron's hand, drew their strength from the one. Galadriel's garden, Lothlorien, would wither. Elrond's valley would lose its secret light. Gandalf himself would return beyond the sea. The time of wonder was closing, as if the world, once steeped in song and shadow, turned toward a quieter, more mortal age. Frodo returned to the Shire, yet the Shire was no longer the untouched land he had left. It bore scars of its own, healed with time, yet Frodo himself could not be healed. The weight of the ring had marked him, left wounds deeper than flesh. Each anniversary of Weathertop's blade, of Shelob's sting, of the mountain's fire, returned with pain. Though his friends laughed and tilled the earth and raised families, Frodo remained apart. Loved, yes, but never whole. And so, when the white ship departed from the Grey Havens, Frodo went with it. Gandalf, Bilbo, Elrond, Galadriel, all passed into the west, into the undying lands where pain could not follow. Sam, Merry, and Pippin remained, their lives long and full, yet touched always by the memory of what they had shared. The One Ring was gone, unmade beyond recall, but its shadow lingered, not in gold or in flame, but in memory. It left behind lessons carved into the heart of Middle-earth, that power corrupts even the noble, that mercy may shape the fate of ages, and that the smallest hands can bear the greatest burdens. Thus ended the Third Age, and with it the long, dark legacy of the One Ring. What began in deceit and pride ended in mercy and sacrifice. And though the world moved forward, though the songs of men grew louder than the whispers of elves, the tale of the ring would never be forgotten. For in every shadow there remains a memory of the fire, and in every light the reminder that even the smallest can change the course of the world.
And so the ring was unmade. In the fire where it was born, it met its end, and with it the last thread of Sauron's power unraveled. Yet the unmaking of the ring was more than the fall of a dark lord. It was the waning of an age, the slow dimming of wonders, the passing of elves into the west, and the dawn of a world of men. This was the legacy of the One Ring, a tale woven from shadow and fire, from treachery and trust, from despair that seemed endless and hope that refused to die. And though its ashes are scattered, its story endures, whispered in songs, carried in memory, and living on in the hearts of those who still seek the light in the face of darkness. If you've walked this road with me and wish to journey further, you can now watch the next tale, another chapter in the long history of Middle-earth, waiting here for you.